Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Zeus with Bruce. I'm here with a dear friend, Francisco Oller Garcia, recognized motivational speaker who has also been featured on NPR and Telemundo, and whose mission is to spread gratitude, and is also a friend of mine from my undergrad at the University of Tampa in Tampa, Florida. Mr. Francisco, how are we doing?
Bruce, I'm just always wheeling and dealing and rolling through life as the wheel FOG. That is me.
I love it. We have a lot to talk about. I do want to preface this that about in 2018, Francisco, you gave a talk at Sykes Chapel, which is it's a chapel at our university, and it was profound. It was there were probably a couple hundred people there. It was inspirational, and we're still talking about it now, 6 years later, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, it's just it's powerful. It's powerful to leave a mark like that.
It definitely is, right? And what guides me and what motivates me and what drives me is this purpose, right? And my purpose is to empower people to live life with self acceptance and courage. And I do that by spreading gratitude every single day in big and small ways, from 1 minute gratitude videos to just saying thank you. And it's incredible the impact we can have by just saying thank you.
Mm. Let's see, because I'm sure you commonly get the question of what's the backstory, all these things, which we can definitely get into. But for yourself, for someone that is a motivational speaker, that means that you essentially have the ability through words or through actions to motivate people to change their behaviors, their thoughts, their actions, their beliefs, their patterns of thought. For you, what does that process look like? And essentially, what can give someone the green light to be someone who enters into the field of speaking and motivating others?
Absolutely. So for me, the thing that led me here was my lived experience, right? My lived experience as a person with a physical disability, as a person that navigates life in a wheelchair. And what I always thought about, or what always kind of made my mind run and run, is like, okay, I may not have the greatest physical ability, but that doesn't stop me, right? It doesn't hinder me. It doesn't define me. So, how can I have an impact on the world? How can I leave a legacy that is beyond me? And how I did that was by sharing my story and sharing my journey. And it just started back when I was in high school. I did a talk similar to how the one that I had at the University of Tampa. And what I found is that people connect to us when they can see our story, when they can see our values, where they can see what we are about. So if somebody wants to enter into this field, right, I think the biggest thing is finding your why. And I know that's one of the hardest things, but when I set my why of empowering people to live life with self acceptance and courage, then that gave me the pillar to spread my message.
I want to ask, a lot of times when life throws us challenges or adversity, it's we really have, in my mind, a couple of choices where it's really to either sink and just stay stagnant or to swim and to rise above. How do you find the ability to rise above? Is that more you're using a model, you're using a strategy, you're using a mantra? What for you says, hey, Francisco, today's another day, it's another challenge. What is the story you tell yourself as to what's going to get you out of bed and to then go forward and inspire others?
The story that gets me out of bed is that the world is full of possibilities and opportunities. And in that, what I mean is that what is here, what is happening right now, is only just one moment. But if I can feel the world, if I can interact with others, if I can have a meaningful impact by just being me, then that is one of the greatest things, right? So, what gets me out of bed is that today I can spread gratitude. Today I can make someone's day by just smiling, even if I see them just walking beside me on the street. And it's those little moments that I look back on when I'm having the toughest of days. So, what
Mm.
carries me, what drives me, what motivates me is hope. Hope for a better today, hope for a better tomorrow, not for me, but for everyone that I interact with.
So having these stories, a lot of the times there's also limiting beliefs in some of these stories. So for someone who is also looking to navigate challenges or to even maybe transition to speaking and motivating others, what happens when they have a belief of, well, you're not really a great communicator. You have a really powerful message. Yeah, your message, that's your story. But wait, maybe I'm not the best communicator. Why should I even go up and speak? Are people really going to resonate with this? How do you nudge someone to help them understand this is also in your wheelhouse? You can also do what I'm doing.
For sure. What I can share with you is when I was growing up, I wasn't the best speaker. I'm not the person who I am today. Like if you call upon me in a meeting, I'll just like riff some rhymes, crack some jokes, do some things right. And I think the biggest thing is that people connect with authenticity, and people connect with
Mm,
genuineness, and people connect with vulnerability. And if you have those three things, then what you have to say will resonate with someone. And of course, we all want to have a massive impact. But sometimes, if you impact just that one person trickles down, right? So, my biggest advice is be sure, be open, be honest, be vulnerable with yourself, ask for help when you need it. Because when people can connect with you and people can see you, then the journey is fun, right? Like we wouldn't be who we are today if we didn't stop trying and if we weren't persistent and resilient.
yeah, I love that. There's a saying I like where it goes, "A coward dies a thousand deaths, and a brave man just once." And I think just how I understand that the situation is, yeah, there's so many of these trials and challenges that we're going to go through, but are we going to get up and are we going to try again? Why should we try again? The last time we did it didn't go well. Why should we do it again? No, no, I'll just stay at home and people don't need me to spread my message. But no, no, there are people out there, and I'm sure there's probably someone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but who has maybe grown up in a similar way that you have, who's maybe going through struggle that you went years ago. And how do you connect with those people? Because you're seeing a younger you, and maybe you can't reach everybody, but for the people you reach who are in a similar situation as yourself, what is it that you share with them? Is it, hey, let me understand you through this shared story? Let me give you guidance. How do we find a way to support people while also giving them the freedom to move forward on their own?
The best way that I've found to support people, to encourage people, to motivate people is to, ask questions, to be curious, right? Because I could go and I could talk about my experiences and my journeys and everything of that. But it's when we find that shared space, that common belief, that common alignment, where stories start to resonate, right? Because
Mm,
I've lived in my 30 years, I've lived a lot of things. But if I know what you've been through, then I can mold my story, right? And I can help you mold yours. And that's what it's about. It's like, while I know a lot, I know I have a lot to learn. And
mm,
that person can teach me how I can be better too. So
mm.
it's a relationship in every way, shape, or form.
I love that. And another quote that came up on my mind was by this guy named John Wheeler. It goes, "As the island of knowledge grows, so does the shoreline of our ignorance." Right? We're on this island and we're growing with what we know. And with you, you've had these experiences, you know how to communicate, you've learned the mindset to overcome a challenge that some people would say, "Oh no, this is unfair, this is unjust, whatever it is," but to create a different mindset. And then as you're growing and you're speaking with people, hey, what can I actually learn from them? This person may be half my age and they may know some how do people have the humility? Is it humility or is it a desire to realize, hey, I want to know more and to know more wisdom? How do you balance the two of humility and also let me learn something?
Sure. For me personally, one of my core values is humility. It's understanding that I know what I know, but there's a lot that I need to know.
Mm,
And this person has been on a different journey than me, could be on a much more challenging journey than I have. So it's about humility, it's about curiosity, and it's seeking to understand and not seeking to answer. And that's how I live my life. I seek to understand you so that we can better both ourselves.
mm. What would you say for you? What's an effective if someone really wants to connect with someone, not to get maybe super deep so quick, because you also need a little bit of rapport and connection to then loosen everything up so then they're open. What would be your go-to 1 or 2 questions that for you really can extrapolate a lot from someone in
Mm.
how they share who they are and what their vision is? What's the go-to questions you would have?
You pointed out something very powerful, and it's a person has to know you. They have to understand you, right? And in our world, we meet a lot of people digitally. So what do? I send people 1 minute intro videos, and when I send these intro videos, I thank people for their time. I thank people for their energy, and most of all, I start them off by saying, "Hi, my name is Francisco. I was born with a physical disability, and what that has taught me is that the reason we succeed is people, right? And when you do that intro, when people can see who you are and where you're from, then that opens up the conversation for them. So, one of my favorite questions that I like to ask is, what is one thing that made you smile last week, right? Because there's so many things that can make us smile, from a nice mocha latte to our dog to our family. And it's a question that shows you something about that person. It goes beyond a deeper level. And then one of my other favorite questions is, what is a challenge that you're most proud of overcoming? So those are
Wow.
two of my questions that I like to use a lot.
Okay, you definitely came ready. That's big. It's true. But really, 'cause what are you really doing in these 2 questions is, 1, what's something that made you smile last week? Okay, smile, positive, let me be grateful. And it's so true, I mean, life is tough for so many different people in so many different ways, but if we focus, like, wherever our focus goes is where our energy is gonna flow, as the saying goes, and we really have to be diligent about that. And, like, I struggled with that before where things wouldn't go well for a while, and that's all I would focus on, and what I would reward in my mind would get repeated. Negative, more negative is gonna come. So I love that one, and the other one as well is, what challenge have you overcome that you're proud of? I think was the idea. So true. And I think a lot of times we go through things on a daily basis, and we don't give ourselves credit because what I've noticed, when people have a very high bar for themselves, nothing's ever enough. And then if they have a low bar for themselves as well, they think, "No, I don't deserve it." In a way, it's that balance between the 2. What do you think is the way that someone can learn to be confident in themselves, but also humble and have humility in themselves, right? That balance. Because both are that both of them to their extreme are vices, but in the middle it's a virtue.
One of the things is that confidence comes from grace, right? Grace that with ourselves, most of all. So one of the things that I like to, do, or one of my favorite things is, you should look back to see how far you have come, right? When you see everything you've accomplished, when you see everything that you've overcome, that next challenge isn't as insurmountable. And then one way to take it one level deeper is, I incorporate gratitude every day. So when I wake up, I say, what is one thing that I'm grateful for? And when I go to bed, I say, what is one thing that I'm looking forward to? And by having those questions, different things can happen throughout the day, but I'm helping shift my mindset, right? Because in life, it's not what happens to you, but how you take action and how you move forward with courage, with purpose, and with grace. That is what matters.
Hmm. I think people really get stuck there, that a lot of it is, I think a nice way to frame it is, "Why me?" as opposed to, "Why not me?" or "What can I do?" And even if everything looks bad, from a logical perspective, is me complaining about it actually going to move the needle forward? And it's incredible to think it usually, I mean, I would say it rarely ever does. Right? It's how do we shift that? For you, when you're shifting it, is that something you need to ask yourself before you shift it? Are you saying, what is the good in the situation? Are you changing your physical state? Do you start with the question? Do you start with your mood? What do you begin with before you reframe the
Mhm.
scenario?
I think the biggest thing is asking a question, right? Because when we ask our question, psychologically, we're stopping our mind from
Mm,
continuing to go down that rabbit hole, or continuing to think of all these assumptions, right? So let's get to the bottom of it. Let's get to what matters, right? And let's start to move our brain. when we ask that question, our brain starts to think of, what am I grateful for today? What am I looking forward to? What is the positive in my life? Because the thing is, there's so many positives in life, but sometimes we focus on that one negative thing, which could be valid, right? There's certain things, right? Like, do I wish someday that I could do long walks on the beach? I mean, in a wheelchair, it's a little impractical, but if you build a path, or if I have my friend carry me, that's even cooler because I'm having somebody carry me royally, right? So it's all about perspective.
Mm. Right, it's all about the perspective and then and shifting. I love what you said about the question, right? Because a lot of times even thinking is just asking and answering questions. That's all it really is. Well, okay, you're on this pattern, and I've noticed a lot of times even people who are struggling with anxiety or just a struggle or a challenge is that they're focusing on a certain outcome and they're asking questions. Oh my God, why is this happening? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. They start panicking as well, and it becomes a big monster that they have no influence over. But it sounds like what you're talking about is what they call a pattern interrupt. How you interrupt the pattern, and for you, you're saying through questions, that's probably the most effective way to shift the perspective.
Correct. Yeah, with questions that matter to you, and questions that mean something to you.
With regard to what you were saying before about disability, what do you see is a major misconception that people have about someone with a disability? And then, as well, what do you think is the biggest disability in the world?
Oh man. I'll start with the first one. So I think the biggest disability, and it's one of my favorite quotes, and it's a quote by Scott Hamilton, who's like a famous Olympic legend, and his quote is, the biggest disability in life is a bad attitude, right?
Oh,
And
wow. Wow.
and that's the truth, right? Like, each of us has challenges. Each of us has different struggles that we go through. So it'd be hard for me to say, like, oh, what I go through is harder than yours, right? I don't know your story. I don't know what you've been through. But it's all about attitude. It's all about perspective. And when we see the world as this land of opportunities, land of possibilities, land of creating meaningful and engaging interactions, then life becomes this amazing adventure. And that's how I try to live my life. It's an adventure. With anything, there's going to be peaks, there's going to be valleys, but it's those valleys that show me to really relish those peaks. And when I'm at those peaks, sharing it forward with others.
Yeah, the idea about the the biggest disability is a bad attitude. It's really true. I mean, think about it. If you're in a challenging situation with a few people and things just aren't going well, and then one person says, "Oh my God, this is so terrible," like, what are you doing? Yeah, we know we're in a bad situation. Like, let's be realistic, I guess, but also let's put our energy towards solutions and take them away from just re-emphasizing all the problems that are there. I'm not really sure what that even does. And with regard, because there's so many disabilities that many people have, and
Mhm.
when you see it in your case, what do you think people aren't understanding that? Because a lot of what people think doesn't usually come from malice; it comes from ignorance,
Okay.
right? They don't mean harm. It's not just, "Hey, I actually don't know." What do you think they're missing to better understand you?
I think, and this kind of goes back to your question that I wanted to make sure that I answered, is what
Sure.
is the biggest misconception? And I think the biggest misconception tends to be that my life is somehow different, right? That I live on this other planet, not other planet, but like that my journey through life is different, right? And this is something that I've talked about throughout my speeches, is like, I have the same challenges and struggles that many people do when it comes to dating, when it comes to navigating long lines at theme parks, when it comes to studying and grades and all these things, right? Like, I've had the same lived experience. It's just I have to do things differently, which isn't wrong. It isn't bad. It's just I just have to do them differently. And what I encourage people is to ask me questions, right? And whenever somebody sees me on the street and they ask me, "Can I help you?" A lot of times there's two thoughts that flow through my head. One is to say no, right? Because, like, oh, I'm proud, I can do this, I don't need their help. But then what I think about is, if I say no, is that going to prevent that person from asking somebody who needs more help than I do? So I'm
Mm,
like, I'm going to say yes. And what I see is, one of the coolest things when I was in college, I went to college in Rhode Island at Providence College, is that when people would start pushing me up hills or down hills, they'd say, like, I don't know what you go through, but I now have a better understanding of the challenges that you go through. So with that experience, by opening myself, by opening my world to another person, I'm allowing somebody to see the world through my eyes. And that's cool because that creates commonality.
I love that so much. When someone says, "Can I help you?" We could say no, and I don't need it, whatever it is. But you're saying you say yes because there may be someone else in a similar situation or who may just need help. And you're also, in a way, giving that person the ability to be of service. That, I
Exactly.
mean, did you always know that? Was that just intuitive, or is that something you just realized throughout the years?
It's a belief and a mindset that I've developed throughout the years, right? And when it comes down to is asking for help and being vulnerable isn't a weakness. It's a strength, because it shows that I'm sure of myself and I'm humble enough to acknowledge when me carrying a box while trying to push myself isn't the most. I mean, it's great, right? Like, when I accomplish this, it's wonderful, but, like, is it practical? No. So if somebody wants to help me, right, I made that person's day. And
Mm.
that's the coolest thing. By a simple act of saying yes, I made someone's day and I made their day worthwhile. And I may not know if that person may be having the worst day ever. And this one moment is a catalyst for something better.
Have you ever watched this show called Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Oh, yeah. Great
Okay,
show.
so I just rewatched it like 2 years ago, and wow. I mean, I fully watched it, and it was life changing. Really, it was so profound. There's a scene where it's Zuko and Iroh, and I think Zuko has a lot of resistance. He has a lot of pride, and Iroh's saying, "Yeah, it's really, it's the source of your shame, right? It's shame." And what he said was really interesting. Was he wanted to help Zuko, and then he basically said, I think it was Zuko. He said, "There's nothing wrong with letting people who love you help you."
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember that, but it was so profound to me because it's really, you're, by letting someone help you, you allow them to serve you, and isn't service the ultimate act of love? Because love, as we know, it's a verb, right? Love is a verb. It's something that you do. And by being selfless in that way and lowering the ego and saying, "Sure, yeah, I could do it on my own, but why not give you the opportunity to serve because you'd like to, and then others can also be served from you as well."
Yeah.
Right? It's a major shift. So just like to your point on that, really allowing them to serve you, it's mind-boggling. What would you say would someone who's, they've already figured out, "Okay, I have this perspective, I know how to shift my mindset. How can I positively affect those around me and be an example that can lead the way?" Right? So it's leading through example, but what else could they do if they have someone in their life who's struggling with lack of identity? They don't know how to achieve their purpose. They're just really struggling with direction. What would you
Mhm.
say to them is something they can do that can help give that person a nudge?
I think the biggest thing that they can do is being active and being present, and when that person is speaking to you, listening without wanting to answer or wanting to fill the gap for them, right? One of the things that we talked earlier is that sometimes people focus too much on the outcome, that, oh, if I do this, it's going to end badly. But how about if we think about it, if I get uncomfortable, I'm going to grow in ways that I never imagined. So it's helping that person, supporting that person, and empowering that person as they go through that moment of uncomfort.
Hmm. So it sounds like not being so outcome dependent, but more so just I don't want to say journey dependent, but invested in the journey. The aspect of, okay, we're here, let's continue moving. If we don't get to this outcome, okay, it's still good. We're still making progress.
Correct. And as they're going through that process, asking them, from this victory, from this failure, from this challenge, what did you learn? And how can you incorporate that learning so that the next time that you go through this, right? It's kind of being a coach, right? In a way, in a very unformal or formal way, is being that person's coach, but using their words and using what they want to do to guide them in their journey.
Yeah, it sounds like using their words, you're using their language because it came out of their mouth. If someone says, you say, "Hey, how was your day?" And then they say, "Oh, I had a really interesting day." "Oh, you had a great day?" "No, no, I had an interesting day." "What do you mean I had a great day?" You're not even listening, right? And it's so much of the communication's lost in the translation. Are we actively listening to what someone shared in order to show, "Hey, we're really listening to how you feel in this moment?" Right? A lot of people are struggling with this that I see on my end, Francisco, is I wanna connect with people around me. I'm asking great questions, I'm listening, but something's missing. Something's missing this connection. Is it that I haven't poured into myself enough? Because that's also a big challenge too. How do you, as well as a motivational speaker, how do you find ways that you can continue reinvesting in yourself? Is that through new material you're reading? Is that through challenging yourself? Because you could read 1,000 books, but if you're not doing things that physically challenge you, that mentally challenge you,
Mhm.
what's going on, right? So how do you find the best way is for someone, ideally, to expand that isn't mental, but something physical?
Mhm. I think one of the I'm a full extrovert, so one of the ways that I challenge myself is like attending networking events and attending different ways like that, right? Because how, if I want to get involved in the community, if I want to create connections, I'm not going to do it sitting at a desk in my home. I have to get out, I have to be out and about. So that's the ultimate vulnerable thing, because a lot of people there may not know anybody, but you also don't know anybody, so that's one shared experience, right? And
Mm,
what's going to happen if you come to say, hey, how are you doing, how's your day, what interests you, what are your passions, right? That's another one of my favorite questions. What are you passionate about? And most of the time when I ask that question, you see the eyes light up, like, oh, I'm passionate about the
that's a
humane society, I'm passionate about world hunger, right? It can be so many things. And then to that, another way that I like to challenge myself is like buying those guided journal prompts. One that I bought recently is called Burn After Reading. And, a couple of questions will ask, like, what is your favorite childhood memory? Who was your favorite teacher? Why were they your favorite teacher, right? And these are things that challenge your mind because they take us back to a time when our life was different, our childhood, or right now, or in the future, right? Or like what we hope to see. So, networking, guided journals, and having mentors and coaches that I can be like, this is what I'm going through, this is what is happening in my life. Am I interpreting this correctly? Right. And to do that, you have to be vulnerable. So those are
mm,
some of the ways that I
uh,
challenge myself.
that's beautiful, and I'm also gonna borrow them too. I'd like to, as we're nearing the end, what do you see is you're someone who has achieved success, influence, and have also overcome adversity. What do you think is the biggest misconception about achieving success and about enduring challenges?
The biggest misconception about, I think the biggest misconception that comes to achieving success is that it's a one time thing, right? A lot of us like to think is when we reach, vice presidential status, or when we reach, X amount of net worth, then that's the day that I have succeeded. But the truth is, if you wake up, if you live, if you show up, if you're present, that's success. Success happens every single day. And we just have to focus on those little victories, as I like to say. Were you able to walk a mile today and your goal was to walk a mile? Then that's success. Were you able to create a new friend? That's success. So when we see success as not this big grand journey, but all these little vignettes that create our life, then life
Hmm,
becomes awesome.
right, right. It sounds like changing the frame as to first even what success looks like to someone, and also the element of it's not necessarily what you get that's going to make you happy, but ultimately who you become. I think that's what we're missing, and it's you become someone, and you're also Okay, you won, let's say, some championship or got a promotion, great, great, great. Okay, cool, that's awesome. But if you stay there, you're stagnating, and I like to say that if you don't grow, you rot. It's kind of like a plant. A plant's either growing or it's stagnating, and if you're in stagnation, you're rotting, right? It's a little brutal, but it's really, are we constantly never ending our improvement, or are we remaining fixed? And it takes a strong mindset for that. If you were to leave one message to the world, you're going to another planet, you're going to travel to Mars, communication is going to be off for 50 years. You get to leave one message to the world. What would you say?
My one message.
And take your
Um,
moment. Yeah, one of the many that I know you have. You can share two if they resonate.
um, one of the things is my life. I live by quotes, and this is my all-time favorite quote, and it's by A. Milne, and he says, "You're braver than you believe, and stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." And the way that I think about that is, we're capable of so much. We have this great potential, and as long as we focus on who we are and what we want to accomplish, and we live with a servant mindset, then life becomes a journey that goes beyond us. And that is the most amazing thing. When the impact we've had on this earth, right, is about how we made people feel, then that is a journey. That is a legacy that no one can forget.
Beautifully, perfectly well said. I also live by quotes, so when you said that, I actually got to write that quote down. That's I've heard it before, but you said it more concisely. Yeah, it's very true. Francisco, beautifully, beautifully, beautifully said. Where can people connect with you or find what you're doing?
People can connect with me on LinkedIn, Francisco Oller Garcia, or on Instagram, Vitamin Cisco, because like vitamin C, I always bring the energy, and pun was fully intended.
Woo! Come on, man. Come on. Come on. That's solid. I like that. That's really good. That's really good. So I want to thank you, Francisco, for joining, your energy, being present, and really just determination, and actually being someone who lives what they preach. It's not easy, and I know there are days that are probably very challenging. But how do we constantly show up? And we may not win every day, but we at least aim to win the day in front of us. And I appreciate you for constantly doing that ever since I've known you and everything I've seen. I know it's not easy all the time, but I appreciate you for showing up.
Appreciate you, my friend.
All good. Okay, guys, thank you for joining another episode of Zeus with Bruce. And like always, remember to reject ignorance and embrace wisdom. Until next time,